From every strand on the line of your reel, to the rods, to the anglers, to the lures on the end of your hook, let's talk about those big bass here on Co-Angler's Corner with your hosts, Rob Welch and John Stoudinger.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Cajun Rob here hanging out with you. Mr. John's under the weather, I think, tonight. So, we got a great guest on tonight. If you tuned in, Mr. Destin DeMarion. How you doing, Destin?
Hey, not bad, Rob. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. And I think we're your good luck. I think last time you was on, you won afterwards. I think, a couple weeks after?
Yeah, probably.
So hopefully be some more luck.
Yeah, probably. You guys can take credit for that one.
Hey, it was too much of a coincidence. But
it's the co-angler mojo, because I was a co-angler too, and you guys are putting that good stuff out there, right?
There you go, man. There you go. But anyway. But I know we're going to talk about the jig-and-minnows and whatnot tonight, so I'm looking forward to that because I know a little bit, but not kind of in depth. So definitely want to get into that. But what you fishing Toyotas? What are you going to fish this season?
Yeah, so this year Doc's is going to run a couple tournaments. I actually was just talking about to them. I'm probably going to go fish their perch tournament in April.
Oh, cool!
They have a big perch kickoff, like the season thing, and then the Rumble on the River at St. Lawrence that they put on. Last year's the first year. Got a pretty good turnout. I think this year will be really good. It's at the end of September. And then I fish like the Kings of Bass on Lake Erie here where I live. It's a 2-day, one day smallmouth, 1 day largemouth.
Cool.
And, a handful of other ones in Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, team stuff mostly. And then my buddy just moved to Vegas, and he's trying to convince me to come fish the U.S. Open, which I believe I'm going to do in October because it's at Mojave at a nice smallmouth lake. And he said just fly out there, and he's got pretty much the same boat as me, and he's like, we can just use mine, and he'll fish as I am. So that's what we're thinking.
Man, can't beat that, man. That's a historic. That's got a lot of history in that tournament.
Yeah, when I was a kid, when I found out about it, I was like, man, I always want to fish that thing, and I just never did. And I think this might be the opportunity. Who knows? It might be the only one, but I think it's a good time to do it for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I remember seeing Aaron Martins fish it.
Oh, yeah.
John Murray. Much of the big dogs is fish that. So that's awesome, man.
Those guys. A lot of them have won it over the years. Like Aaron Martins, John Murray, Bertrand. All those big West Coast hammers. They've all had a lot of history with those, as well as a lot of other guys that don't tour like over this part of the country, but still are really, really, really good.
Absolutely. That's one of the best out there. I've heard about the U.S. Open all my life, and man, there is some unreal stories and guys fishing it. So a lot of history there. So awesome. But I know Doc's is a great tackle store. I know them well from work, so they got a good reputation.
Yeah, you tell me you did the West Coast thing, so yeah, you have to tell me all the good tackle shops when I'm out there, so I can get hit up.
Oh yeah, there's some. I know there's one huge one out in Arizona that's really, really good. So
hook up.
Copper State.
Oh,
Hookup's good too. Yeah, Hookup's good too, but Copper State is really, really good.
Very cool.
But yep. But anyway, we'll get right into it. Now, how did you did you start early on the jig-and-minnow, or did you kind of learn, seeing every guys have success? When did you start fishing it?
So, one of my good friends, Mike Schnupp, on Erie, I had made a technique. There was like 5 of us that I told about this. I called it de-gliding. So It was essentially the same thing, but with a jig head and a minnow style bait, and doing the same function, fishing it horizontally and very subtly, just getting it over their head so they come up and get it. Slightly different, a little more hopping and stuff, I'd say, but that was probably the precursor to me getting into the jig minnow thing. Yeah. But as far as the traditional jig minnow, how it is now, I'd say I was late to that specific game. I don't know what it was. It just seemed very, I don't know. It just seemed very like niche and like kind of almost like the swim bait thing, which, it's got a time and place, but the jig minnow has proved to be every time and place.
It is.
That was one I wish that I had jumped on harder when it did start. So I kind of was behind the 8 ball a little bit there. And then I've really dedicated a lot of time to learning the intricacies. I mean, I have a good stable of people, I network and we talk a lot. So, I mean, I share what I'm figuring out, and we're all kind of work together to try to bring up that knowledge base and understanding.
Absolutely. I remember way back when in like the Tennessee Valley area, like around Knoxville, it was called something different. You throw a jig minnow and you like let it pendulum down to the boat, pendulum down. I remember that, that's the earliest memory I had of it. But
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because the first person that showed me it's they call it tight lining, right?
yeah, tight lining. Yeah. Yep.
3B Outdoors. It's a show. I'm
Yeah.
sure you know
Yeah.
about it. So
Oh, yeah.
a good friend of mine, Nathan Light,
Hmm.
he showed me. I met him, I think it was 2016. And, we stayed in touch. We fished together a couple times. And he showed me like the traditional tight line, the good old
Yep.
East Tennessee tight line,
Yep.
and which, I mean, even then he was like, oh, if someone could use, once forward facing sonar, he's like, I bet you could do this really well forward face. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it's basically just an adaptation of tight lining, the traditional, tight lining, which they couldn't see the fish ahead of them. It was just kind of penduluming it back, like you're
Yep.
saying, like on a bluff or something where you think they're suspended, and just kind of twitching it and just keeping it like just moving like that, kind of shaking a little, rocking back and forth, but
Right.
keeping it on that plane real subtly. In that cold water, it was killer. I mean, I watched him catch fish, and I took it home, started doing it, the traditional way, but it took me a while to adapt the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I think they had a Bass Open on Cherokee early in the year. I think it's 2018. And that
Yes.
really come into play. And I remember that was like one of the first major tournaments. It seemed, it was like the major, top 10 almost always doing it. So,
Yeah. No, I remember that. Yeah. The Demiki and the tight
Yep.
lining and that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, the Demiki thing and the tight lining, the jig minnow, they all kind of like share a lot of similarities. It's just, a little bit of how you present it, where the Demiki is just straight vertical, and the other ones are horizontally. But it's just so much more dialed now with the jig minnow than just the traditional tight lining. But there's still so many aspects of the tight lining that we're going to talk about some of that, because I have mine set up right here. But
oh, cool.
Just what Nathan taught me, with the traditional way, even from the knot that you tie, that helps it kind of shimmy back and forth, and the whole works, the whole system. I mean, they've refined it. It's not been me. It's definitely those guys.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of trial and error, I guarantee you. But you're right.
Yeah. Those guys are the East Tennessee crew. Was, from what I understand, that's where this kind of started, and then Japan kind of adapted it and made it way more applicable to a lot of different situations and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And now I know there's a big trend. There is the sinking braid, the real thin sinking braid.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think Berkeley's got a Ford sinking braid. I think it's like 4 pounds of 17.
Yep.
And but it seems like that's a new trend coming out: sinking, real thin sinking braid. And I'm sure you can sling that, minnow and jig head way further with that thin braid for sure.
Oh yeah. I've been trying to dabble in the sinking braid this year too. I'm gonna do it more. I mean, even for drop shotting, because I mean I deep drop a lot, so I think it'd be beneficial for that too, just for rate of fall, getting it down to the fish quicker, especially when you're trying to throw at one fish. It just keeps swimming.
Now, and talking about that, I've known some co's that, especially on like a clear lake like Dale Hollow or something, when their boaters bringing in fish, they'll have a bunch of followers, a group of them following, and a lot of them will drop a drop shot down about 8-10 foot and just sit there and kind of shake it when that group comes by. One of them grab it. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, I've
that's
heard a lot of guys.
Pro angler move right there.
Yeah,
very good. Have you done that one, Rob?
I've tried it a couple times, and usually when I do it, it's just one. It's just a single fish. So, but it's still in the back of my hand. If I see a bunch of followers, hey, that's definitely want to do it. But hey, we got about 2-3 comments I'm running through real quick. All right, Miss Ashley Cow says, "Hey guys, hey Ashley, hope you're doing well.
Thanks for coming and tuning in."
Yep, and our old friend Mr. Jeremy May says Dustin sucks on the James River. I know he's kidding.
Well,
he's
half the time.
Yeah.
I'd say the first part of my career, I think I cashed a check on the James every time, but the last couple I have struggled. I don't know what it is. I think the last one was a scoping tournament. I don't know why that was a struggle,
Huh.
but
Wow.
yeah.
It did. How you boys doing? Hey,
Way
do good,
better.
Jeremy. Hope you're doing good, man. I know Jeremy's probably tired of the snow right now, as much as he's been getting over there. But yeah, if you want to go through your setups and kind of the baits and all, and what your system is. So, and he says, "Yep, it's been a struggle." Oh, I know it, man. You've got a lot more snow than I have. You can have it.
Yeah, I mean it has been rough this winter. We after Thanksgiving we got 5 feet in like 3 days. 5 feet of
Ooh.
snow.
Yeah, I think the kids in Kentucky, I think they was out like all of January except for maybe a week. So yeah, it's been
Yep.
crazy.
Well, so like this is one of my setups that I use like a decent bit here on Erie. I have an angler tungsten eclipse head right here. The
Yep.
eye is key, especially the good old East Tennessee boys. They swear by the eye. There's something about having eyes on your jig head that is key. Other portion, you got tungsten, shows up better on forward facing, even on your 2D. I mean, it's just dense, so it's more dense than lead. It shows a better profile. It's easier to track. And then the good old Sakamata shad.
Oh yeah.
Just like everybody throws. I've been playing with that one among many other baits, which I'll talk about some of them. This is a 4-inch. I think as far as the Sakamatas, a 4-inch is pretty good all around. So I have caught them and thrown them 5, 6, 7-inch, in very specific times. But even a smallmouth will be the 6-inch one. I saw it at Champlain. I experienced that and it was wild. But a 4-inch bait is your best all around. Like I can Demiki with this. I can, stroll it, jig-minnow, whatever you want to call it, horizontally over top of the fish. And then I don't know if you can see great. I'll try to get it closer to the camera.
Yep.
But you can see the knot. It's above. It's a loop knot.
Yeah.
So the loop knot that's the traditional like tight lining East Tennessee thing. So when I stick the tip, it helps. So like the owner range roller, it's got the wings on it essentially that helps kind of go like that.
Yeah.
Which that is very helpful. But with the loop knot, you can make the jig head basically do the same thing, even if it's like just a ball head jig. That's what, for tight lining, that's one of the main things. And this isn't necessarily a secret. I mean, Nathan has shared this, but a lot of people aren't versed on the tight lining specific technique. But this really helps, with that shimmy. You want that like just real tight shimmy, especially in that cold water when they're a little more finicky, something like that. That nice little wiggle just helps it look just natural, but not, overbearing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Great hook on these two. This is an owner jig hook. Me and my buddies have been pouring basically the same one. I helped Angler Tungsten with this, pouring the same one for quite a while. We do it with a Ned head and we do it, like just a swim bait head too. But now it's tungsten. We're just doing it with lead. Then there's a screw lock, so it helps keep your bait straighter.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then it saves your bait. Like I can catch a lot of fish with this before it tears up. Which those pin ones are great, but the screw lock is really key. I've seen a lot more companies starting to do the screw lock now, and we've been talking about it for a while. So, I mean, Angler Tungsten I think was one of the first. Well, I'm sure they weren't the first, but I mean, a lot of East Tennessee guys helped with this, and a good amount of input on this jig head and the components with the owner hook. And I mean, the hook is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be owner or whatever, but it's got to be a really good sharp hook because a lot of times they short strike it. A smallmouth, the key is pinning it in that, I'm sure really hard mouth, like very bony, very hard lips, like getting it in that rubbery hard lip is key. So having the right hook is really important. This is like a medium gauge. It'll flex just a hair, but not much. So it's you get a good hook penetration. And I like to use a rod that's got a little bit of a tip to it. Not too parabolic, but a little bit of tip so it can absorb, you don't pull it away from the fish.
Yeah, like a shock absorber. Yeah.
Yeah, and a shock absorber when you're twitching. So it's that play in your rod is twitching slack instead of pulling tight line. They do call it a tight line, but you're twitching slack, just like you are with a jerk bait or something like that. So it's
Absolutely.
all about making it natural. All those subtle little movements are really key. This is a this is a Douglas. This is X
Yep.
Matrix. I like to throw they have a 610, 6103, which is like kind of like a medium light, but it's got a little, it's not like super flimsy. It's got a
Right.
little bit of backbone to it. If I'm just throwing like a smaller bait jig head where I don't have to make super long casts, if I really want to make a really long cast, I'm going to use a longer rod. So like a 7.72, maybe 7-4, medium or something if I'm using a heavier head. But usually I want to use a medium light if I'm using like a lightish head. So
I got you.
anywhere from 3/6, well, even less. I mean, eighth sometimes. If you're fishing it high in the water column. 3/16 quarter is probably your best all around. You can fish it in most depths, and especially on most suspended fish, over deeper water. Occasionally, a 3/8, maybe a half if it's really windy or deep or something. And you try and get it over that to keep it down. But other than that, I really don't go too heavy because I think it inhibits the action a little bit.
Okay, and that kind of covers. Got my good buddy, Mr. Matt Mattingly. I see him like every day. He says,
I know
read
Matt.
that oh yeah, Matt's a great guy. He says, read that some guys swear by a light power rod versus medium light for scoping. What's your scoping setup?
Yeah. So like I said, mine's a medium light. I was actually one of the first people that we talked really in depth about like the jig-and-minnow, actually more hover strolling, with that special Ryugi hook and stuff like that, was Ariel, who works for Jackal. I believe he runs like Jackal USA.
Right.
So he said he only, and a lot of Japanese guys will only throw it on ultralight. And I was like, I'm not throwing an ultralight.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? Like super flimsy rod. And I was like, I'm not doing that. But obviously they catch the heck out of them. I've tried to adapt it to my own style, and in my happy medium, I was like, what about a medium light? He's like, I don't think. I was like, I'm going to try it.
Yeah. Hey.
I don't think it's an issue with the medium light, but I'm sure a lot of those guys swear by it, and they keep doing it that way, and it's for a reason, because it's successful for them,
Oh yeah.
I haven't tried a specifically light power, but I like the medium light. It's like my happy medium. Some guys even throw a medium. I think that guy that won Champlain for that invitational last year was throwing like a 7.2 medium or medium heavy, and he was still catching the heck out of them. So I think it's about like how you're twitching and keeping that slack, keeping that just like a jerk bait. I with my clients a lot of times I see I'm like, all right, throw it right there, and just say whatever cadence, I'll tell them. And I watch, and they're just pulling a tight line and pulling the bait way ahead, and it's just making it look unnatural too. Like it's not making the same movements as when you twitch slack. It keeps it more in place, and it kind of darts. Just same concept, I think. I mean, you're just wanting to keep that slack, and that's really what you're trying to use to impart all the action.
Absolutely. And I've seen guys, like I said, on jerk baits, they can make it turn around and look at the bass, go all the way around. It's makes them want to attack it. Bass is falling, and all of a sudden it's facing.
Really good jerk bait fishermen, they can do that. I mean, it's a special. I think I'm a pretty good jerk bait guy, but I'm like the Hank Cherries and those those guys are just jerk bait nuts. They're so good at it.
Absolutely. And I know it's on my jerk bait. It's come like a year-round bait. It used to be pre-spawn only, but there's some guys year-round they're throwing it.
Yeah, I mean, with forward facing and stuff, people are targeting fish out in the abyss, all times a year with a jerk bait, so you can weight them and get them down and keep them in that zone, or however you're going to, approach the fish. But it's been effective all year round, even in the hot months when people thought it was not very good, a good presentation to use. It's definitely been.
Absolutely. Now on your line, are you using all fluoro? Are you doing braided fluoro? What's your typical line setup?
Yeah, so I typically always throw a braided main line.
Yeah.
And then I have a leader. So this is, with this I think it's a 1/4 ounce head. I typically will throw 8 pounds, sometimes 6 fluoro. This is gamma fluorocarbon, but the braided main line typically 10 pound. I like a thin. I like to match up basically the diameter. So a 6 pound fluoro or so is going to be comparable to that 10 pound braid, 6 or 8 pound. So as long as they're similar in diameter, like that's where I like to match up. So almost always I'm throwing, less than 10-pound fluoro, on my spinning setups typically. Otherwise, I'd probably go to a bait caster.
Oh yeah, it makes sense, and you get a little better action with that lighter braid and lighter leader for sure.
Yeah. Have you delved into it much? Have you
A little bit. I've kind of told around the BFS stuff. That BFS stuff is pretty interesting. Some of that, yeah.
It totally is. Yep. Yeah. What size line do you typically throw with your jig minnow?
I've been doing like 6. Like I've been playing around, but I've done 6. But I even dabbled in 4, but I'm like, it didn't feel right, so I stuck with 6.
I do think when Nathan taught me, they use pretty light line. It might be 4 or 6. It's real light. I mean, they typically go really light with the tight line, and they use, I think, an 1/8 jig head is like the typical standard one, but it's kind of gotten passed by for the more advanced jig minnow stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, some of those jig heads have got like the line ties back behind the jig head itself. It's got some crazy. I've seen some crazy designs.
So you're talking about like that queen tackle one?
Yeah, the queen tackle and the chompers. Yeah,
that was a good idea. I mean, because that's going to be a really unique, shimmy and action to it. That is a cool. There's a lot of good heads out there. I mean, the Owner Range Roller is, probably the most popular. It's a really good head too. I use that. But yeah, like the Gamakatsu Horizon head, another very popular one, really good one too. Those are probably the main 3, I would say, like between 8 angler tungsten clips and those 2, I'd say are the best 3 in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And it seems like certain lakes kind of cater, like Del Hollow. I mean, that's a real big scoping lake, but there are certain lakes like that really cater to that style.
Yeah, those deep clear lakes, because I think a big part of it is having enough field of view, for it to be it. Because if they can't see it, they can't track it down and find it and eat it. Because it's not like something that has a bunch of, sound or crazy, gaudy color or pulse in the water. It's very subtle. It's definitely for those clear water situations, and it's just totally a finesse technique for sure. And yeah, there's a lot of other baits too. Like I said, I mean, I do throw a little bit of the max scent stuff, like the flat nose minnow. It doesn't have quite the same shimmy. That Sakamata is very well balanced with just how the wings go. It shimmies really nicely.
Right.
I mean, even people use traditional baits like flukes. Gulp minnow was the original tight line one, from my understanding.
Yep.
The plain jig head with a gulp minnow. That's how I learned. And I mean, just adapting from that. I mean, everything's really just a slight variation of that.
Just little tweaks here and there.
Yeah, totally. And I've been getting more into like, okay, take some shine off of the head, because sometimes I feel like that's unnatural. Even when I was a kid, sometimes the fish would not like it if there's that jig head was too shiny. Throwing them off. So like having a couple different variations, like a matte color one and that, which so I mean that's definitely, or just like a subtler, silver color or gray or whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or put a little sparkle on the head. I've seen guys do all kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's painted. There's so many different things you can do, and some days they like that, and sometimes they're like, I don't want to eat that. I mean, they tell you what they want, and a lot of good guys that do it a lot and pretty much exclusively. There's a lot of guys that's like that's all they do. That's all they do. They'll have a bunch of rods with different size heads, baits, colors of heads, all that kind of stuff. Which I typically, if I'm on that kind of bite, I'll have a few different variations too. But most of the time, they're not super fickle about it. If you're in a tournament situation and the lake's been getting just straight up hammered, they can get a little picky. But you just keep adapting, keep adjusting colors and size, and I mean, that's a big thing for sure. You got to jiggle your minnow right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me of like the crankbait guys. Way back in the day, Red Fritz have 10 rods and they have 8 pound, 10 pound, 12 pound to get to different depths. So that reminds me of that way back in the day.
He was an innovator for sure.
Oh yeah, he was.
Still like the deep cranking OG.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I got a couple of comments and questions here real quick. Going to run through. Ben Capra says, I haven't really played around with the jig head minnows mainly because I don't have live scope on my boat. Do you think it's worth trying to figure out jig minnows just using a 360?
You can, like, some guys, and speaking of co-angler stuff, some guys are just basically fishing it and counting at different depths behind somebody if they're fishing
Yeah.
it. And you can still catch some fish doing that. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like I said, when I first learned, it was basically like the tight line. You weren't seeing them. You were just fishing it at different depths in the water
Yep.
column, letting it pendulum back. I think it's worth trying for sure. I mean, anymore, if you're at a pressured fishery, you got to throw at a fish right on the money or he's
Yeah.
not going to come get it. You know what I mean? But if it's somewhere that maybe they're not as pressured, I could totally see, it being effective, just traditionally tight lining, without a live scope, without something like that. You have 360. If you know where the fish are, at least you can cast towards them. But if you know how they're kind of relating in the water column, which you can kind of tell on 360 by the way the shadow is of the fish, right?
Yeah. Right.
So you can kind of adjust your cast and where you keep that bait in the water column that way.
Yeah, like that countdown's good. And I've always had, even when I did have I was fishing behind a live scoper as a code, they'd always say, hey, I'm catching them 6 to 8 foot or 10 to 12. So they're always pretty good about telling you kind of where they're catching them. And
Yeah,
I've asked a couple of younger guys I fish with that's really good at it, and they fish crappie tournaments in the off season. And they said crappie's real tough, and that helps them kind of figure it out in the depths and all. So I thought it was pretty cool.
That is cool. Yeah, so my team partner for a lot of stuff around here, he probably likes crappie fishing and ice fishing more than bass, but he loves bass fish, and he loves the scope, and I think a lot of it is the crappie fishing background and understanding of how to catch them. Like a lot of crappie fishermen now are able to target bass very much in the same ways.
Absolutely.
So it very much applies. I mean, a little bit difference in bait selection and stuff, but it's the same concept now between the crappie and the bass.
Yeah, and how they react to the lures, different sizes or different colors.
Yep.
Yeah, that really makes a game changer on the live scope stuff.
Oh,
And then
sure.
yep. And then we got another quick question from Mr. Mattingly here. He says, use any scent or bait pop when scoping. Several brands making stuff now: Bait Pop, Thump Gel, Spike It, and Sonic Coat.
I have it. I got it at a couple different tournaments. They've like given it or prize things. I have not really used it much. I know guys do and have had good success with it. I think I should more, especially last year. At the end of the year, I was catching them good on the jig minnow, and a couple times, like after I would, they would just knock it and not eat it. I'm thinking with that little bit of just extra, maybe they just commit a little bit more to it. But for sure, it's going to help you. I mean, I've heard from everyone I know that uses it. It helps you see that bait way better in your screen. So I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt. No. I just worry about scents. The only thing I worry about scent, like the best scent covers a human scent. That's my opinion. That's just like a hunting thing. You want to cover your scent. So as long as it does that, but there's some things within scents that also aren't necessarily like great for a fish, but most of the scents out there are pretty good. As far as that goes, I think they all understand that basic concept, but I have not used it yet. Have you, Matt? I would be curious to hear your success with it.
Yeah. Now I know a bunch of crappie guys. They'll like put it on their line and everything. I mean, it shows on their line. I mean, they'll coat their lines with it and stuff.
Interesting. So, I definitely want to try it more, and I'm glad you said that because there's so many things. You just forget certain little things. You're like, oh, this came out that. Yeah. No, I need to do that. You should see my tackle room.
Oh man.
I just heard stuff every year. I'm never gonna use it.
Oh yeah, I do that. Yeah, I'll give a bunch of stuff to the local high schoolers, and before my wife kills me. So I'll do that.
We have a student fishing league, which a guy named Harry Emmerling runs here, right on Ohio, PA. So I help with some of that stuff. So I give them, whatever stuff I don't want a lot of times.
Okay. Yeah, I met actually one of my good team partners that way. He was a bass fishing coach, and I changed rod companies, rod sponsors, and I gave him a bunch of rods, and we just kind of hit it off. And man, we fished for a long time. It was a good deal.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, the tackle thing, you work in that industry, so I'm sure you got more than enough.
Oh yeah, it's like I'm an addict working at the stuff I'm addicted to. It's a blessing and a curse. So
You're the chocolate addict working the chocolate factory.
pretty close, pretty close. But I get to see new stuff coming out, and
Oh yeah.
you see stuff come in, you're like, and then like the dice. I didn't think the dice was going to take off like it did, but man,
I mean, we talked before. Like I didn't either, but it works for sure.
oh yeah, it does. Yeah, we got a older guy that owns a shop in Texas, and he said, I won't carry that stuff in my shop. You know how those guys are. So some crotchety guys.
Look dumb.
Yeah, but he's hilarious. But it's funny. You got all kinds, man, on shops. It's funny, but yeah.
I'm sure you
But
run into quite a few characters on that front.
oh yeah, and my thought on scent is I think clear water may not be as a factor, but if you got a little stain or especially muddy, I think that helps the fish kind of track it and ferret it, and then I'll hold on to it longer. I know I used to tip my jig trailers with a little bit of scent, and it seemed like they hold on to it longer, and they they go running off with it. Yeah, and they.
For sure. I think it's just not going to hurt you for sure.
No, definitely not. And I've heard the old guys, I'll spray it with WD-40 and all kind of crazy stuff. They still catch it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know, like people swear by that. I'm like, I don't understand it, but I mean, if it works, so yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I know. Hey, it works for them. Hey, more power to you. Anyway.
Old anise smell, the black licorice.
Yep. But we talking about the BFS. I think BFS is going to become a big player in the forward facing for us over with. I think some guys are kind of don't like the spinning gears much. I think there's going to be kind of a bigger, I guess, movement, or you'll see more guys seeing the BFS casting reels and rods, and they're really getting hot.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Sakai Ushio, who's probably one of the best co-anglers.
Yeah.
He practiced with me for a couple of years, and I mean, that's pretty much what he does. And
oh yeah,
I learned a lot, from him because honestly, like a lot of people know me from finesse fishing, but I much prefer to power fish.
Oh yeah.
It's just I'm pretty decent at finesse fishing, and I mean, if there's that bite, I'm usually gonna, if I commit to it, it usually ends up well. But the BFS thing, I was intrigued what he's able to do with that. I mean, it's changed. I got some BFS stuff after that, I can promise you. I mean, just
I noticed
skip little things like real light baits, and
yeah,
it's interesting. There's a lot of possibilities there.
Oh yeah, and I noticed like Strike King has got a big line. They've come out with a bunch of BFS size, like top waters and cranks and everything.
Oh, so. It's the trend. It's either very small finesse or very big.
Yeah.
Like obnoxious, right?
Yeah, like big glide baits or like a little minnow.
Yep. That's the pressured lakes for you, and the result of forward facing is like, yeah, some days you gotta absolutely teeth pullingly finesse, and then other days like the only way you can get them is by going obnoxiously bigger than anybody else, to get that bigger bite. Because the fish, like, if I'm gonna mess up, I'm gonna mess up with a bigger fish or bigger bait,
Yeah, like Greg Hackney, throwing a heavy jig because he gets the reaction, because it goes falling down him, and they said they got less time to think about it, and he just react to it. So
yeah, he's trying to hit him on the head, make him think twice.
Yeah, it's like they're cutting the reaction time. They got just a small reaction time. They ain't got time to think, and they just grab it. So pretty impressive. But have you noticed? I've heard from a few guys that like the forward facing, they're having to cast a little further to get fish now. It ain't as like they're having to cast 50, 60, 70 now to get a good bite.
Yeah, and that's where like a lot of the guys, there's been an advantage with like the saltwater transducer. It's like 2 times as much. This live scope. Even Lowrance has one too. I think it's less less available known, but so some guys tell me like I can't catch them unless I throw 100 feet from the boat.
Wow.
And I'm like, good gosh.
Wow.
Like, that's pretty far. That's a long cast even, like, to get it that far, but like you said, the progression of things like the sinking braid, these more castable braids, that's helping you get those longer casts. But a lot of times you're throwing a lighter jig head, so you definitely need. That's where so like with a hair jig, like a marabou hair jig,
Yeah.
I use a very long rod with a very whippy tip because that helps kind of sling it because it's such a light bait. So, I mean, even doing something like that when you really need that long cast, I mean, it can help with like those longer rods.
Yeah, and I think you go into medium light with the braid and that medium light. I think that's a good combination. You got,
I think so. I think
no
right.
stretch, and then you got the medium light like a shock absorber. So I think that's a good combo.
Yeah, and the braid just comes off the reel so much nicer, especially like the higher strand,
Yeah.
count ones. They come off the reel so nicely as opposed to fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon doesn't come off the reel that good.
Yeah,
It's
especially in cold. Especially in cold. Yeah,
yeah,
I've
cold
noticed.
it gets very coily and brittle. It's just not as good to cast. Just straight fluorocarbon.
Yeah.
That braid, it doesn't. The cold really doesn't do much, in my opinion, to the braid.
No, it does. And I've said, braid's like a co-angler's best friend. You just change leaders for the tournament, or you can change it underwater, and good to go.
I mean, shoot, your braid. If you're not fishing like absurd, like I mean, I have in the past, you can get a year or two out of a spinning reel of braid.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's more cost effective too than going through very expensive fluorocarbon. So I mean, we're all trying to penny pinch where we can. We don't want to, do too much where we're handicapping ourselves. But I mean, that's a good place where you can definitely save some money.
Yeah, and I know a couple older guys. They'll like after season they'll get their spinning reels and they'll have an empty one and they'll reverse the braid. Like they'll put on another one and go. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty slick. Yeah,
I do the same thing. Yeah, because you got the fresh braid at the bottom's never really been used.
Yeah, never hit water. You never. So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Unless you get those pesky wind knots, which we definitely get. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll make you use some colorful language.
Yeah, it's not fun when you got a couple, guide trip and you got all the wind knots and you're pulling this without. It can test your patience a little bit for sure, but it happens to us all. I mean, the wind knot stuff that's just there's pros and cons to each, and it's worth it to me to use braid, even with the wind knots. Yeah.
And if you have to retie your braid to fluoro and it's windy, that's not fun.
No, that's why I don't use FG because it's so much more tedious to tie and long. Like I just do the Alberto and cinch it down.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of pros do that. They'll do the FG and then it breaks off or whatever they do. That Alberto or crazy Alberto.
Yeah, I think it's crazy Alberto.
Yeah,
I've heard so many variations of what it's called. It's the one where you weave it through the loop and back over and cinch it down. I mean, that's really.
And you better go through the same path in that little loop. Yeah, or you're gonna go.
Pulls out.
Yeah,
exactly.
Been there, done that.
Sure. Believe me, I have too, many times.
I heard that, but well, that's cool. But have you tried any different baits? Have you experimented on something besides minnows or like any? Like a worm or something? Have you tried some other stuff?
So when I talked about the degliding thing that I used to do, I used a Z-Man hula stick.
Yeah.
And because it's real subtle, but the back is much narrower, so it just kind of did this.
Yep.
So I used it like a smelt color, very bait fishy, color. That thing worked really good.
Cool.
I'll still use it a little bit, but it's not as effective as like this, it just come a long way, but it does work. And there's times where I'm sure they don't see it. So it could definitely come in handy for anyone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now I know I think it's called Z-Man, the Descended Jerk Shad. That seems like that's been picking up steam, especially on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And I think saltwater guys and freshwater guys are both using it. So.
Oh, people love it too. So like the only problem I have, like I can't use it as much with the screw lock because of the elastic.
Yeah.
They're better with the pin. If you if you have a lighter, you can heat up your screw lock and just put it on.
Oh, never thought about that.
That's a little trick, but if I'm using the Z-Man, I typically use a different head where I can have a pin.
Yeah, so makes sense.
The elastic, you can just pull it over the pin and it usually just stays, But the elastic baits definitely work. I've had better luck probably with the Sakamatas just personally. But they definitely, the elastic ones work. I mean, I have definitely caught some nice fish on it.
Yeah, it just takes a little more patience to get that thing lined up just right.
Yes, for sure.
All right. It had got a couple of questions or a couple of comments from my good friend, Mr. John Adams. Says, "Good evening, guys. Hey, John, how's it going, buddy?" And he says, use some of the line taming serum. It helps you get further cast with braid. I'll try
Okay.
that.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I have not.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I use that KVD line and lure spray.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean that helps a little bit, but I'm interested in what this line taming serum.
Serum. Yep. Yeah, I've heard a lot about it, but I'll give it a try. Now, on that same subject, now I know you up north, you got a little bit colder temps than I do. What's the best way to keep the ice out of your guys? I've sprayed Vaseline. Oh, okay, I never heard that. Okay,
Vaseline's the best. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've tried the line conditioner and dipping it and all that, but
yeah, like that. The line conditioner is decent. It'll help a little bit, but the Vaseline.
Okay, good deal. I'll try that.
Next time you're getting all the ice around your guys, put on some Vaseline. It'll help for sure.
Okay, I'll try that, man. Thanks. I always wondered that. I figured you guys up north would have some little trick like that I didn't heard of. So.
We have to think of all kinds of crazy stuff
yeah.
to deal with all the cold and all the junk that we have to deal with up here.
Yep. Now on the like severe cold, like if you got like 40-degree water, like 43, 45, do you still live scope?
That's money temperature right there.
Oh, I know. I mean, for you guys, that's like normal, but down here.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You said what? Do we what?
By 45 degrees, like the 40s, do you still do the minnow? You still throw the minnow out and like slowly?
Yeah.
Or anything different?
Yeah. Typically, you can still catch them like horizontally. Some days they just want it vertical when it's cold, that. They don't want to move, up but typically if you can get them to go up, they'll eat it. You just have to gauge their mood, Yeah. Sometimes they just want it sitting over top of them and then they just come up and get it. Yeah, probably more so vertical Tamiki stuff, but it still works. I mean, especially for us, 45 degrees, they could be chomping. Like, I might be catching them on fun stuff like swim baits and stuff. I mean, who knows? Like, here, anything above the 30s is usually pretty good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, 30s, I mean, I catch them in the 30s. Like, last year, the ice was off at the end of January, and I was catching them all February, mostly Tamiki. But some days they're pretty aggressive. Like they would eat a little bit horizontal,
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. Now I know there's some guys out there just kind of getting started on live scope. Now, what's the best way if you got a school of stripers or something? How you kind of know if it's a bass or not, or a striper or whatnot? What's kind of? I know some guys will say how they react or how they swim.
It is, yeah. Typically, a size will tell you sometimes because a lot of stripers are big. So you have like the thing. So obviously it shows you how far away, your rings are or whatever.
Right.
But you can use those to help tell. All right, that fish is like 2 feet long, or that's 4 feet long. That's not a bass.
Yeah.
And just the way that they swim and how the return shows up on the live scope. I've used live scope. I've had it on my boat, but I've had active target for the last 4 years, maybe. Pretty much the same. I haven't seen much difference. I think the active target has a pretty good target separation. Garmin's better at something. They're about the same. Like you can see certain just patterns on the fish sometimes if you get a good enough, return on it, where you can be like, yeah, it's not a bass, just by how it's swimming, like really like that. You're like, that thing is big. It's got a lot of pivots in its body. It's probably not a bass.
Yeah.
Or
if they're tight, or they're kind of tight together or something. How they're kind of stacked together, probably.
Yeah. How they stack definitely impacts it. But sometimes the bass will even be in with striper, around the bait. I think typically it's a bigger bass because the smaller ones probably get eaten if they're too big of stripers.
Right.
But the bass will get in with the stripe if the bait is there. But yeah, typically they do look a little bit different. It's hard to explain other than just like the way they move.
Yeah.
It just takes time to like decipher. Like there's not an easy way to necessarily describe it. Like I've just spent thousands of hours staring at it, so I've been in every part of the country looking at scope and seeing how carp looks and a white bass and a stripe and a catfish. And I mean, sometimes it's hard to distinguish, but more and more it gets easier just by, like you're saying, how they stack, and just how they move, really.
Yeah, how they react to bait, your bait's dropping down, how they come up, or if they're real slow, and
yes, like lake trout, stripe, they like to make herky movements and stuff like I've noticed that a little bit. Bass are not necessarily like that herky jerky,
Yeah.
It's more they move solidly, like they're a good predator. I mean, they just don't use too much energy,
Yeah. Or they'll follow the bait, kind of follow it for a long time, or something.
Yeah, they'll track it a lot, but they're not moving much. Like you don't see they're just real slow, just hovering by,
Little sneak attack action.
Yes. They're waiting for their chance to strike. That's one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Now I'm curious too. I know, seeing like a ball of shad, sometimes you'll see bass kind of in the middle or top, and you'll see some big ones under it. You ever try to get some of the big ones kind of up under? I know some of the buck bass will knock the minnows down, they'll kind of flutter down, and the big ones kind of sit there and feed under them, let them do all the hard work.
The ones up are generally more easy to catch, for sure. But if there's too much bait, they're not, because it's white noise. Your bait is basically white noise. So those ones underneath it, like you're saying, if they're knocking them, they're letting them do all the hard work.
Yeah.
It's like at a job site when the old guys are just watching everybody. You know what I'm saying? Those young guys are going and breaking their back. They're like, I did that 20 years.
Y'all have fun with that.
I mean, that's how it should be. But so they kind of do the work, and they'll just wait for the scraps until they need to spend some energy. They're smarter about spending their energy than the young bucks.
Oh yeah, and I say they're more kind of size of the minnows kind of focus. If it's a half inch too long, they're kind of suspicious. So
and that's where, like I was saying, like a lot of the minnow baits, I mean, 4, 5, 6, 7 inch bait. Sometimes they just want a big profile. They just don't want to waste energy on something small. Sometimes the bait's just small and they're keying on small bait. So I mean, it's good to have a few different variations of that. But seasonally, you do it enough, you kind of know what size bait they key on based on the time of year and the season and stuff.
Oh yeah, or you'll see shad floating on top of the water, or you'll catch one, and of course it spits 2 or 3 shad out, and you can kind of they're on 2-inch shad today, or 1 inch. So.
Yep. And I mean, even then, sometimes the bigger ones might just want a bigger shad. They, even if the other ones are eating the smaller ones, they just might be like, I don't really want to waste my time. Ooh, that's something big. I want to eat that. It's just like the slide bait thing,
Oh yeah.
Either go really small or go really big.
Swing for the fences.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have heard some guys trying to do scope and do some glide stuff. I've heard some guys. I've heard some guys kind of messing with it, but
no, it is effective. I've definitely done a little bit of it myself. I'm not a huge glide bait, swim bait guy. That's Jose from Docks. That's why I put him. Hopefully, he's a better swim baiter than Jose.
I figured there was something behind that.
Totally not true. He just throws it. That's all he wants to throw. We were at Presque Isle, like you're talking about cold water. It's like 40 degrees, and he's throwing like a topwater rat and like one of those giant rats. And
wow.
Like a buka shad over. Like, I was like, dude, they're not going to come and eat that over 20 feet of water right now, No,
there ain't moving much in that cold. They're not going to move too much.
No, so I mean, I've dabbled in it. I'm going to do a lot more of it. For me, the glide and the big swim bait thing is such a niche, like small percentage thing for me. Like, I do it, and there's certain times when I'm going to do it, but most of the time I feel like there's better in a tournament setting. Just have fun. That's a fun way to catch fish.
Oh yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But yeah, in the tournament setting, there's only certain situations I feel like it's pretty effective. But if you hit those situations, I mean, that could be the deal.
Oh yeah. Or if you're looking for one good kicker, you're in the day and you got a small limit, and you're looking for an upsize.
Yeah.
And it seems like certain lakes, like in Texas, out in California, seem like their lakes tend to do better at that kind of technique.
Well, there's a lot bigger fish. They're used to eating very big bait. So like I said, the big ones don't like to spend too much energy. They want to wait for the opportune time, and sometimes that's all they want is a big bait. Sometimes all they want is something like this, you know,
Yep. Oh yeah. I've seen it.
a dice, the
Yep.
dice.
I mean, it's like you just got to keep kind of tweaking on your size, minnows, even the color. Sometimes I've seen make a difference.
Oh, for sure. Yep. Even with a glide, I mean, the color definitely makes, and the way it chops, like you've got
Yep.
choppers and then you've got gliders. I mean, there's the different actions are for different situations, and the guys that do that a lot are very, very in tune with that and
Yeah.
really good at that. So, I mean, they'll usually get a fish or two in a tournament that could be really crucial, and that's important.
Absolutely. Or I know there's an old guy that fishes the mountain division, and he's like, yeah, I threw that big glide bait all day, and I had 3 followers, 2 chasers. Well, what'd you weigh in? Oh, I didn't weigh anything.
Yeah, Jose and I have that conversation quite a bit.
Oh, do you? It's like, the fly fisherman, well, I had 2 chasers and 2 followers, and well, how many did you catch? Oh, well, I didn't catch anything. That's not fun, man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of guys that's what they enjoy. Like that's
Yeah.
what they want to do. It doesn't always apply to a tournament, but sometimes it does, and they come in with a giant bag. You know what I mean? It's a hero or zero a lot of times if you're going to commit to it. But you could catch a really, really big bag. But I've found most of the really big bags that I've caught have not been on a glide bait.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you like cashing them checks and making points. So yeah, I'm with you.
I like to catch big bags, but I mean, a lot of times you don't have to do that. You can catch a lot of fish, or even just get bites. Sometimes even finesse fishing, I'll only get 6 or 7 bites. I mean, there's situations where it's like that, but I'm targeting the biggest fish, even though I'm not throwing a big bait per se.
Oh, absolutely. But I said it's like a moving target. Fishing is like a moving target. I mean, like you know how it is. You practice, you're killing them. I mean, tournament day, everything changes. It's raining, temperature drops 40 degrees. It's like, man. So.
Oh yeah.
That's part of the game, I guess.
It is. Yep.
Now, if you have a high schooler that's kind of just starting out and he's just kind of getting into live scope, what's some tips would maybe kind of a newer fisherman trying to get into the live scope and the minnows? Any tips you could give them?
I mean, keep playing those video games. That's all I'm gonna say. It's good practice. Those guys pick it up so quick.
Oh yeah, they do.
I mean, those younger guys are. I mean, I grew up with some video games for sure.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of stopped when I was a little older and adolescent, But those guys, like, I think that's honestly the best practice. It's like those virtual reality, those guys that do all the VR stuff. Like, that's a good way for people to practice golfing, even, and like other things. Like, it's legitimately a very good training for live scope and fishing that way with electronics, and it's an extension of that. And a lot of those kids, they love video games, then they get to do this and they're like, oh, this is pretty much it, but I'm outside and I'm doing something. So it's cool that they're able to do that and be able to get out of the house and do those kind of things too. But they're natural. They're good at it. I mean, they're very good at it.
Yeah, it's like they're natural multitasking, and they don't realize it because they're watching fish over here, their lure here. Yeah. They're multitasking and don't realize it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's because there's just so much stimuli, for everyone right now with everything you have at your fingertips, online and everything, and just it's hard to focus, right? Because there's so many things, but. Yeah, I think they're good at that for sure. And the video games help, but YouTube, that's another one that's like helped immensely because there's so many resources out there. Video Bass University, TV, that's great resource too. Just some like higher level content that you're probably not going to find as much of on. I mean, you find some good stuff on YouTube, but it's just a step above,
Yeah. It's more. They break it down a little more, and it seems like
Yeah, I mean they're more apt to give you the real juice. You know what I mean? Because they're getting paid on bass.
Oh yeah. And
So
hats
I'm
off
not
these
big
young
bass.
guys. I mean, they're putting time on the water. I mean, some of these guys are spending 5 or 6 days a week on the water. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
they're putting the time in. So hey,
yeah. I mean, you're
hats
in
off to
tune
them.
with all those little. When you're out there a lot, you're very in tune with.
Oh yeah,
things. I mean, I've been the guy that's put 300-400 hours on my motor in a year. I mean, I know what that's like. I mean, it becomes like an extension of just your muscle memory of like what you're doing. When you're spending that much time doing it.
oh
Uh,
absolutely.
but yeah, like YouTube has been a huge thing for the younger everyone, not just young
Yeah,
guys. I mean, I've watched tons of stuff and learned a lot from YouTube.
yeah,
Bass,
me too.
yeah, I'm sure you have too. Bass U has been better for me because
Yep,
it's a little bit higher level and learning from
yep.
like peers and stuff. But guys have good YouTube channels and they share some tidbits. But I feel like it's a little more apt to go a little bit deeper, like
Oh yeah,
into it with the Bass U stuff. But there's a lot of resources. I mean, fish tips, like you can get some really good intel on that. Like that's what a lot of the younger guys, that generation, like those are resources that they have at their fingertips to help them, learn live scope better, learn how to break lakes down better, see all the past history on these lakes, which is a great resource. I mean, I always use
absolutely.
old videos to study it, kind of
Oh
see
yeah,
what I'm preparing for, for
yep.
a new lake or something like that. And it helps a lot. You kind of have,
Oh yeah,
when you go out there, like, oh, I feel like I've been here. Like, I feel like I've seen this, right? I feel like,
yeah, yeah.
it feels like not that crazy. Whereas before, like years and years ago, you didn't really have that as much.
Oh yeah, technology is amazing, man. I remember when I first started out 100 years ago, it had the flashers. Oh, that's high tech.
100 years ago, man, don't sell yourself down the river
Oh,
like that.
I know. It's been fun. I mean, I've saw a lot of growth in the
Oh,
sport, like
I'm
you have. I
sure
mean, yeah,
you've seen like a humongous wave of change
yeah,
in
yeah,
the fishing world, like in your time. I mean, I've seen it too, but not even as much because yeah, you said we went from nothing to a flasher to
yep,
side imaging and 2D
yep.
to now live scope. Like that's crazy.
Oh, it is. It is. Now, what do you think, in your opinion? What do you think the future is going to hold? The immediate future. What do you think?
As far as with tournament side of it, or
Yeah,
in
tournament
lakes and
side
stuff,
and the sonar.
it's I I don't specifically, I can't definitively say, but I'm going to say there's going to be more and more restrictions on
Yeah,
the forward facing
yeah.
moving forward. And reason being is because,
The cost,
well,
a lot of it.
that's part of it for sure. I think part of it is just like there's a level of consistency that needs to be achieved within like a professional sport.
Yeah,
And when people are having like 5 live scopes on their boat and like it was the Wild West, right? And
yeah.
they've
Oh yeah,
they've cut down on it, which definitely helps. But I mean, I think it's a good move in the right direction as far as just standardizing. Like,
yeah,
okay, you can't have 25 transducers on your boat. I mean, I don't understand why people are like opposed to that. Like,
yeah,
I really don't. Like, if you're gonna have a consistent sport, I mean, with car racing, you
yeah.
can't run all this crazy engine. You have parameters of what you
Yep.
can do. So it's hard to be legitimate and taken seriously on the outside, people that aren't in the fishing world when they're like, oh yeah, why does this guy have 25 transducers? This guy has one. That doesn't make sense.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, you got to have an element of choice in what you can do and brands and stuff, but
Yeah.
there needs to be a standard and it's getting that way where it's
Yeah.
becoming more standardized because yeah, like you're saying, cost is a big one. I mean, people realize, yeah, when you have 25 transducers, there's only a handful of people out there, and they usually do well,
Yep.
that have enough money to spend $150,000 on a boat and 25 transducers. So
Yep.
it's limiting your sport's drawing power from
Yeah.
people that are able to, grasp being part of it and seeing themselves as part of like, nah, I can't afford it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I think it's potentially hurting a little bit, and that's why there's been some changes. I still think a lot of the organizations are figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Like
Yeah.
it's a piece of technology, okay,
Yeah.
but it's not easy for them to make the right decision. I don't even know specifically what the right decision is. I'm just saying that's what I see happening, and I could see more, standardization among the sports, just for consistency, even from a viewership standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the different tournament organizations are kind of experimenting this year, and they're kind of looking at the other guys saying, okay, they did this. Let's see how they do, So I think it's a lot of kind of testing in the waters, as you'd say.
It is. It's in the experiment phase right now because obviously a lot of them recognize that they needed to make some changes, and they all did.
Yeah.
So, that's good.
Oh yeah, and they kind of give them a choice, the older guys that don't really want they got a choice, and I think it's good to have choice. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So I mean, NPFL, you don't use it at all. They have that choice, and a lot of older guys enjoy that aspect, and some of the guys want to use it more, and they have that option. I mean, there is the options for sure.
And there's room in this sport for the guys that just want to use forward facing, the guys that don't. There's plenty of room. Don't have to do either one. I mean, you got a choice, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see how long the choice is, because like I said, I think it's going to standardize more.
Yeah.
Across the board, or say NPFL just sticks with that, and they stick, ride that horse, and the other two are going to standardize, as far as how much you can use as well, or they might even go the other way and do like the NPFL, but I doubt it. I just don't see it happen with them.
No, I think it's going to be part. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be standardized, and there's going to be limits. So, but it's going to be around for a while.
It will be, yeah. But I mean, they've already standardized and changed rules for this year, and I mean, overall, I think most guys are generally happy with it. But there's always a gripe for something. I mean,
different stroke for different folks. It's going to happen. So.
Of course.
But anyway, hey, we got a few minutes left. I want you to kind of give you the floor for your sponsors and people who's helped you out, and give you a few minutes to do some shout outs.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, Doc's Tackle, my boy Jose. Like I said, I'm a better swim baiter than that. Great group of guys. I mean, they took me in last year, and I've very much enjoyed being part of their team and what they're building. I think they do things the right way, and they have a really good open mind to the industry and carrying certain products and going outside the box. And I think they've done a good job with really growing within the hard to find baits, as well as keeping the ones that everybody needs. And it's been fun. They've been a lot of great guys, and like I said, the Rumble on the River, St. Lawrence, end of September. Anybody wants to fish that, it's going to be a great event. It was last year. It's only going to get bigger. I think it's guaranteed 5,000, depending on the boats, but it can go up to like 10,000. They'll cap. I think we cap it at 80 boats, so that would be, I believe, 10,000 for first.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Douglas rods. It was kind of a tandem thing between Douglas and Doc's. I've really liked the X Matrix. Awesome rod. I've used the Eras. A lot of my clients, I used to have them use the Eras. LRS, really good. The X Matrix are super sensitive. A lot of the finesse fishing I do, I was worried, anytime I change rods about sensitivity, and this has been one of the most sensitive, good lines of rod that I've used, over the years. Angler Tungsten, G2 Gemini, Centimark, Phoenix Boats, Power Pole. I've been with Power Pole for a long time.
Yeah.
Love. I have 10 footers. We have a lot of like that 8-foot range when you can't really hold an 8 feet. Like the 10 footer is perfect.
Oh,
Since I went to the 10 footer, I love it.
Cool.
But yeah, those have been great. They've treated me really well over the years, and I mean, there's Fish Sense, the Binsky blade, best blade bait ever created. Been with them for a long time. So I mean, if I'm leaving anyone out, I apologize, but those are a lot of the ones I've been with for a long time. FC Marine, it's where I get my boat. Great, awesome group of guys. Get my service there, get my boats there always, and they have a good selection of Phoenix, Skeeter, Vexus. I mean, they got a lot of different G3s, all that. So over in Ohio.
Cool.
And my wife, of course, and my kid. So I definitely wouldn't have ever been able to, fish and do what I have without their support. So that's
awesome.
Been huge.
Absolutely, man. Gotta have the support from home to be a success. There ain't no doubt. So definitely. But well, hey man, I'm glad you spent a few minutes with us, and hey, I've learned quite a few things tonight, and really
Well, good.
appreciate you sharing, and best of luck this season, and we'll be keeping up with you and cheering you on.
Yeah, you too. Hopefully you can get out soon. I know you said it's
Oh
been
yeah,
a struggle to go fishing, so hopefully you
yeah.
can. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I got a kayak tournament. Actually, Bassmaster Kayak is at Dale Hollow, which is one of my
Oh,
favorite
you,
lakes.
you
So,
must be chomping at the bit for that one.
oh yeah, into
You have
April.
scope on
So
your kayak?
yeah,
Oh, okay. There you go.
yep,
That's all you need out there.
yeah. I've been playing around with it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm getting into it, and I said that lake that I was telling about, that guy caught that huge crappie. I'm gonna
Yeah.
start experimenting at that lake down there. I'm gonna carry. We get off early on Friday, so I'm gonna start carrying. As soon as it gets warmer, kayaks going in my truck every Friday.
Are you telling me you want to catch the state record crappie? You want to beat that guy? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if I can beat him, but I'm gonna sure have a lot of fun trying.
Oh, I bet. You know, it
But
lives. The quality lives in there, so there's got to be one close to that, if not bigger.
oh yeah, and it's the bass, the minimum bass, keeper bass is 21 inches there, so it tells you anything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is a good lake. It's got a. I said you don't think it'd be in Kentucky, but it's full of milfoil, and it's got some logs and standing
Yeah, you would
timber.
not think that.
Yeah, you wouldn't, but it is. It is
I
full
have heard
of.
of that lake, so it must be good. I mean,
It is. Yeah, it
people don't
is.
talk about the bad ones.
No, they don't. It is pretty, and it was built like '72. They got maps of like where the houses and the roads are, like before they
Perfect.
flooded. So yeah,
Well, yeah,
it's
good luck at there in Dale Hollow. I hope you. When is the kayak at Dale Hollow?
I think the 29th of April. I think Saturday, Sunday. So
It should be a good time of year.
oh yeah,
I would
definitely.
think they'd be chomping.
Yeah, and I love Dale Hollow. It's a great lake, scenic lake, beautiful lake. So
I have never
looking
been.
forward to it.
It looks fun.
Man,
Yeah, I hope
it
you
is.
smash it.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna sure try, but I'm gonna have a lot of fun either way.
Absolutely. Well,
All
yeah,
right.
thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Rob.
Anytime, man. We'll have you on again. Like I said, we appreciate you sharing your tips and tactics. And man, said have a great season this year. And we'll talk again soon, my friend.
You too. Yeah, tell John I said I hope he feels better.
Oh,
If he's
absolutely, man.
yes.
All right, I will do, man. Hey, good seeing you, and take care, my friend.
You too. See you, Rob.
All right, see you, buddy. All right. But thanks to Destin, man. That was awesome. Man, I learned some stuff. So I hope you guys did too. And said hope John gets feeling better, man. We miss you, and I'll be talking to you soon. And guys, great week. We had some great guests, and appreciate y'all tuning in, giving us some likes and subscribing. And we have some stuff coming up. We'll probably release next week, so y'all stay tuned. And as my good old friend Ozzy Osbourne said, we love you all. Peace out. Have a good week. Hope y'all get out and get fishing this weekend. So take care. God bless.